When we look at pork, whether it's ham class or a pork carcass class or a pork loin class, it's what we call a cutability class, with one exception. What that means is primarily when you approach that class, you're going to be looking at muscling and then trimness. And then you look at quality again as a secondary factor. Now, when you look at muscling and trimness, you're going to be looking, first of all, the way I teach students is you look at trimness first and evaluate that, and if they're close in trimness, you place them on muscling. When we look at the ham class, we look at trimness first. And as you look at trimness, the first place you're generally going to look is what we talk about is under the butt face. This is the butt face, and we'll look at fat under the butt face. Now the butt face can be broken up into kind of two regions again, much like some of the other cuts that we've talked about. And first is what we call over here is the rump side, and over here is the forecushion side. So this is the butt face, and you have the rump and the forecushion, and you're going to look at fat first of all underneath the butt face, over the rump region, over the forecushion, and then finally in the collar region you'll look at the fat, and you'll evaluate that. And as you look at these two particular hams, I think you'll see that there's a little more fat over the rump and forecushion over here than over here and here. Also, over the entire forecushion, there's less fat here than there is here. And then finally, as we look at the collar, we'll see less fat over the collar in this region than we do over here. So the trimmer ham over the fatter ham. We don't care about size. You're going to find differences in sizes quite often. Again, the assumption that we make in all classes is that they weigh the same. Okay, if we make that assumption, then we're going to go on trimness first and then muscling. Now, if these two cuts were close in trimness, then we would look at muscling. And again, we'll look at the size and the muscularity of the butt face. We'll look at the rump section, the forecushion, what it shows us, and look at what we'll talk about a meatier or a more muscular butt face. Also, we'll use dimensions. We'll talk about a deeper butt face as we go from this point to this point. That would be depth of butt face. And from here to here would be the width of the butt face. All of those are dimensions that we would talk about in trying to evaluate the muscularity of the butt face. Again, that's a window of the muscularity of the entire cut. But again, don't just rely on that, because what we like to do a lot of times is have cuts that are very similar in butt face, but ones that are much more muscular in the cushion region of that particular cut. Now, as we take a look at the cushion, you can kind of think of it as a pillow cushion that's square, and we use three primary dimensions and then one other dimension that we'll talk about. The primary dimensions are the length of the cushion, which would go from the H-bone back towards the heel, the length, the width, and the depth. Depth would be from the tabletop to the top of the cut, would be called depth. So you've got depth, width, and length. Now the other factor that we will talk about is the plumpness, and that's just the sheer muscularity and the roundness as you go from this part of the ham cushion back towards the heel. How much plumpness is there? And we'll talk about that, either more bulging, shapelier, or a plumper ham cushion. Also, we'll call the section here the center section is another term. If we go just a little further up from the heel, right behind the H-bone, this section right here we'll call the center section. That center section, the reason we call that is because that's where you get the center cut slices out of the ham. Also, we'll call this the butt end, is another term. And back here, if we go behind the center section, we can call the shank end back there. So we'll look at the plumpness and the shape and the dimensions to determine the overall muscularity of the particular ham. Now, the last factor, after we've looked at trimness and muscling, one other thing we ought to talk about is quality. And generally, you're going to use quality only as terms that you're going to talk about in your reasons. You're going to look, again, at color. Color is probably the most important factor to look at in comparing the quality of hams. Where in the beef loins or beef carcasses, we talked about marbling first. But color and firmness are more important in pork than marbling. And so you're going to look at those two factors first and talk about those in your reasons, or talk about or look at them for your questions class. Also, you will look at marbling, which are the flecks of fat inside the muscle, and we'll look both in the forecushion as well as in this region of the ham butt face. If it is PSE, which stands for pale, soft, and exudative, Exudative is another word for watery. If it's pale, soft, and exudative, then that particular cut generally is going to be placed at the bottom. It's inferior for processing, and most pork, particularly hams, are processed into fully cooked ham products. Therefore, it is an inferior cut and generally is going to be placed at the bottom of the class. This is a PSE ham, and as you look at this particular ham, remember PSE stands for pale, soft, and exudative. It's pale in color, particularly as you look at these muscles along the bottom. You can see that the muscles also along the bottom are kind of sticking out from the rest of the face, which would indicate that it's very soft. And then finally, you can even see water moisture, quite a bit of water on the surface. And if you look down on the floor below here, there'd be water on the floor because it's dripping water. Therefore, it's not holding onto that water, and we call that exudative. And so PSE hams generally are going to go to the bottom of the class. Okay, and when in a contest, we're going to make it pretty obvious. So as you look at it and you see a ham that is much like this ham, you need to think about putting that ham towards the bottom of the class, regardless of the trimness and the muscularity of that particular ham.